What is .NET Framework 4.5 and Visual Studio 2012? Before learning anything, it is important to understand the evaluation of the concept. Before learning Visual Studio or before learning .NET Framework, .NET technology, it is very important to understand the evaluation of .NET, that where from it started and currently it is at what position. So let's have a brief history of framework. So in 2002, Microsoft first time introduced .NET 1.0 with CLR Common Language Runtime 1.0. .NET is actually a network enabled technology. So before that also Microsoft having lots of other technology like Visual Basic, but they introduced .NET for network enabled technology and to create a broader view. That means not only Visual Basic but any of the languages can use the platform. So that was the basic intention, to provide a platform for application development, application design and application deployment, and that is not going to be specific to certain language, but any language which follows certain rules can use this platform. So in 2003 they modified the version and they introduced .NET Framework 1.1. Between 2005 to 2008, .NET took tremendous changes, and really from here .NET started getting the name in the market. Though 1.0 and 1.1 was available, but very few people were using. But 2005 onwards, when Microsoft introduced .NET 2.0 with CLR 2.0, people started using this. In .NET 2.0, first time they introduced generics. In .NET 2.0, they added partial classes. So lots of things they added in 2.0 and development become easy. Now we can see that 1.0, 1.1 and 2.0 are side by side development. That means if you have .NET 1.0, you cannot have 1.1 in your system. You need to uninstall 1.0 and then you have to install 1.1. Same thing, if you have 1.1, you cannot have 2.0. You need to uninstall and then you have to install it again, a newer version. But so this was the problem known as DLL hell. But after 2.0, Microsoft solved this problem. So rather than giving a new framework, they extended 2.0 and provided us 3.0 with WPF, WCF, card space technology. But it was not so popular, and with this technology we have lots of problems. So again they introduced 3.5 and service pack 1, and this is the one of the you can say after 3.0 got flop, 3.1 3.5 contains all the features that require for development. Then again between 2010 to 2012 they introduced .NET 4. In 2010 they introduced .NET 4. In 2012 they introduced .NET 4.5. Again they came to the same model. 2010 was a separate version. But here's the good thing, that in previous version like 1.1 or 2.0, that cannot stay in the memory simultaneously. From 2.0 onwards we can have all the frameworks in the system. That means we can have 4, we can have 4.5, we can have 2, 3.0. That means you have always a backward compatibility. But prior to 2.0, no. Up to 2.0, yes. If you have framework 4.5, yes, you can do development in 2.0 also. But if you have only .NET 3.5, you cannot do development in 4.5. You need to upgrade your framework version. So the latest framework which is available is 4.5 with CLR 4.5 with all the cool new features like parallel programming, we have async programming, we have code execution. They have increased speed of execution, they have changed. And previously, for writing a code in 1.0, if you have to write 4 lines of code in 4.5, we can do that in 1 line. Take an example of threading. Once we'll see the topic, then we'll understand what was there in older version, what is the new way of writing code. Now, the basic question, what is .NET Framework, or what a .NET Framework can do? In a simple word, if I say a .NET Framework is a platform to develop, design and deploy an application. Develop, design and deploy application. What we can do using 4.5 or our .NET Framework. So we can say a .NET Framework is not a single component. It's an entity with multiple components. The first and very important component is CLR. We can say this is the heart and brain of .NET Framework. Without CLR, you cannot execute anything. All the codes written in .NET must going to execute on top of CLR. That is known as Common Language Runtime. Within the CLR, we have JIT and Engine, just in time, and native generator. What is that? We'll see. Then we have garbage collector. In other programming languages like C++, while allocating the memory, we need to deallocate it. But, or if you have a memory leak, you need to bother about how to get that memory. But in .NET, you need not to bother about memory leaks, or you need not to bother about, after assigning memory, to retain the memory. You need not to do anything. It is the sole responsibility of the CLR to run the garbage collector and retain back the memory. Then we have security model, code access security and all, authentication and authorization is available. Then we have exception handling, very important thing. Now in .NET, your application doesn't handle exception. Exception handles at CLR level. What is the meaning of that? If there is no exception handling in your code, what will happen? CLR will take the initiative and it is going to terminate your application. It is going to handle the exception and going to terminate the application. And then we have loader and binder. We know very well why we need loader for loading the class. Binding multiple assemblies, we need the binder. On top of this, they have given us predefined set of classes known as base class libraries and framework class library. We can also say that a framework is a partial implementation in the form of base class libraries. Using that partial implementation, we can extend or we can create our application. On using this CLR and base class library, we can create application like WPF application, Windows Form application. We can go for dynamic language runtime also. If you talk about R and Python, there we use dynamic keywords, there we use dynamic allocation. So all the things are available. ASP.NET application, legacy web applications, yes. Then we have services, we can create services with the help of WCF. We can go for language integrated query. That is the very important thing. For example, if you want to do a database programming, what we need to know? We need to know front-end technology as well as back-end technology. But take an example, I know only SQL Server, I don't know Oracle, but my client is asking, sorry, I can only take this project only if you will give me backend as a Oracle. So what I have to do, first I have to learn Oracle, then only I can write the code. But with the help of LINQ, I need not to learn anything. I need to learn the LINQ syntax. Remaining everything will be taken care by language integrated query. And I can write queries using C#, and that is pretty much easy. And not only that, pretty much more things like we have Windows Phone application, we have games, we have MVC, lots of cool stuff, lots of cool application we can create using .NET Framework. Let's have a detailed overview of what .NET Framework contains. So basically we know that at the bottom there is going to be common language runtime. On top of we have base class libraries. On top of, we have ADO.NET and data XML. Apart from base class library, we have ADO.NET also. For example, there is a front end UI and there is a backend database. How they will communicate? Because UI is written in C#, database using SQL Server. That means two different languages and they don't know each other language. So how they are going to communicate? So using ADO.NET, they both are going to communicate. So ADO.NET is a middleware between front end and back end, which translates the request vice versa. Then we can create ASP.NET web services and web forms. We can create Windows application. We can, on top of everything, Microsoft has given us common language specification and common type specification, and certain languages supporting all these features like Visual Basic, C++, C Sharp, JavaScript, and many more. And the basic things and the very important thing, that all these things are free. We need not to pay a single paise to anyone for using this all technology. Now you can ask, then why Microsoft is asking money for, or for what Microsoft is asking money, for what Microsoft is asking license. So believe me, they are not asking anything for this all technologies. They are asking money for a tool that we are using to use all this application at one place, known as Visual Studio.NET. So for Visual Studio, they are asking license. If you want to use this remaining concept, yes, it's available on net. You can download without Visual Studio also, and you can start doing development using a notepad and the framework. Nothing else is required. But yes, life will be very tough. Visual Studio help us to create dynamic and very rapid application development. That is not easy using notepad or any other tool. Very important thing. What is common language specification? As I told earlier, that not only Microsoft languages, but nowadays other languages are also supporting .NET framework. How it is possible? That means there should be certain specification. There should be certain rules that each and every language is going to follow. For example, if you talk about VB, and if I declare integer, I have to write int. I have to write dim a as integer. I have to write dim a as integer. But if I take a C++, I have to write in C++, I have to write int a. In C#, I have to write int a. So everywhere the keyword is different, but they should, at the end, they should follow a certain specification. That Microsoft has given us the specification. Okay, that tells any language can support .NET framework, but that language should support all these things. Next, common type specification. We have different kind of variables declared in different languages, but once you have CTS, what common type specification telling that though it is integer and int, at the end it should follow a technique or at the matrix that is common for everyone. So that means it is VB it is integer, in C++, C Sharp it is int, but at the end it should follow something. So that they have given us in format of system.int32 format. So though you are using anything in your language, but at the middle level it should support system.int32. So that's why they have given us common type specification and common type language to provide any other language. If you want to implement that, okay, you want to create a new language with your name, what you have to do, just you have to implement common language specification and you need to follow common type specification. .NET framework and CLR execution model. What happens if you have a code? It's very important to understand how a code is going to compile and execute. So we know very well at the bottom all the application executes on operating system, but our .NET code never ever directly execute on operating system. Our .NET code, that means our native code, is not a .NET code. Only native codes can execute on OS, but a .NET code always executes on common language runtime by using JIT compiler. What happens when we have a source code? That source code is going to be compiled with a language compiler, and it is going to generate an assembly code known as MSIL or assembly code or intermediate language. That assembly code we need to give to language runtime, and by using just-in-time compiler, it is going to convert that assembly code or IL code to native code that an OS can execute. And it is the same model for all operations, all programming languages. But for C++, it's unique. C++ can create a managed application or a managed code, as well as it can create unmanaged component also. So if there is any unmanaged component, after language compiler, it will directly executes under operating system. So there is always two compilation. First, language compilation. Here a language compilation is happening. If you see this, and here just-in-time compilation. Now, what very important question? What is just-in-time compilation? If you have 10,000 lines of code, .NET is not going to compile all the code. Common language runtime is not going to compile all the 10,000 lines of code. It is going to compile only the code that is required for execution right now. And after compilation, the code will be stored in the cache. So next time, rather than compiling it again, it will get it from the cache. Now, what about the remaining code? So the time you need that code, the time that just that time the code will compile and it's going to be executed. That's why normally we say that first time .NET code is executes little bit slower. Why? Because it consists of just-in-time compilation. Now, how many types of just-in-time compiler we have? So we have three types of JIT compilers. First one is standard JIT. What it did, it compiles the block and store in the cache for the next use. Then we have IGNOJIT. For example, in PC, mobile phones, we cannot have a standard JIT. Why? Because it takes lots of memory. After caching it, for caching we need memory, for execution we need memory. So IGNOJIT contains two things: the standard JIT minus caching. From the standard JIT, remove the caching. This is ideal for small devices. Then we have last and very important, FreeZIT. This was the concept of Microsoft, but Microsoft has never given us FreeZIT. In place of that, they have given us engine.exe, known as native generator. What happens? I told you that MSIL code will not execute completely. But if I want to share my assembly, I need pre-compiled code. If I want to store something in global assembly cache, a location where I can put my code and or assembly, and from there I can access from multiple applications. For storing something in the global assembly cache, the code should be pre-compiled. But we are not running, we are just compiling. So in that situation, if you want to store anything in the global assembly cache, we have to use engine to generate native code, and that native code we can keep in the global assembly cache. So we have three types of JIT compiler: the standard JIT, IGNOJIT, and pre-JIT.